6. Now right here, this queen c2 move, what I'm aiming for is to put extra pressure on the e4 square because I'm planning on going e4 myself. And usually his knight over here is going to be on the f6 square, putting more pressure on that. That's why I put the queen here, because usually his knight is on f6. So when I push e4, I can back it up. So anyway, that was that was the point behind that move. And he did indeed play knight f6, and I immediately launched out with e4. When you're white, I feel like it's crucial that you have to be the one attacking. Since you already have an extra tempo from the start, you need to be the one attacking. I played e4. He played d takes e4. Pretty much the only move at this point other than to move one of these two pieces, because if not, I'm going to go e5 myself and win a piece. So he takes on, I take on with the knight. There's exchanges on e4 with the queen left in the center of the board. And there's really no immediate way for him to attack it besides the move f5, which would be terrible, really. It would just totally open up his king side. So he plays queen c7, a3, just to stop any checks from the bishop coming to b4. That's what I've had some problems with. The queen coming to a5 and the bishop coming to b4 in a pair, checking my king, and that's how they get an attack going. And I've had problems with that before, so I just go ahead and stop that. Yes, he can go queen a5 right here and check me, but I mean, it's not effective. I could just block it. So he castles, and I play c5, kicking his bishop out of that diagonal that's paired with his queen. It just looks dangerous, so I kicked him out the way. He retreats. Now I bring my bishop to d3, threatening checkmate right here on h7. He stops it with g6, which is a very, very double-edged move, and I do not like that move at all, because now, as you can see, the dark squares around the king are just terrible. And if his dark squared bishop can get eliminated, it would be a clear advantage. A very double-edged move. I said in my last analysis that these 4 squares right here is just squares I hate putting my pawn on if I have to. And I guess that's really the only way he can defend this besides the move f5. So I respond to this with knight to e5, putting more pressure on this pawn. So I now have 3 pieces attacking this pawn right here, as you can see, and the bishop is behind it. So I'm just putting a lot of pressure on it. He plays knight to d7. I'm assuming to challenge my knight, because it is a very strong piece right here. Now I play bishop to h6. Forcing, you see, now here's where I'm exploiting his dark squared weakness right here. Putting some pressure along this diagonal right here, the h6 to f8 diagonal, and forcing his rook to move. So I know he would really like to capture my knight right here. I know he would. But obviously he has to move the rook. And now there's no retreating the knight at this point. I have so much pressure on this pawn right here on g6. And it's such a weakness. My dark squared bishop is exploiting the dark squares around his king right here. And so it's just, I'm not retreating the knight, number one. I'm not going backwards, so what I'm doing is I'm going forwards. So I sacrifice on f7, inadvertently putting more pressure on this pawn right here on g6. The only way to refute a sacrifice is to accept it, like Ginger GM said, somebody else said. So he takes it. So I have a long think right here, and so I realized it might not have been that sound of a sacrifice, but like I said, there's nowhere to go forward. I mean, I go backwards, but I hit him with a check, and he blocks it. So now the knight here is pinned, and the king can't necessarily sidestep because of the bishop, or he could go back, but he'd be a sitting duck back there, I'm assuming. So no rush, I castle, and he makes a developing move. He has no sense of danger. You know what I mean? I'd at least put my rook behind him or something. No sense of danger. This move is just too slow. So here comes Harry. I start pushing him. The knight's pinned, so I'm trying to push him so he'd be forced to capture and then open up the g file. That's the whole point. Moves his king out of the pin finally. So now I bring the other rook in, just adding a little more increased pressure pointing toward his king side, because this pawn is fairly weak. He moves his rook over. Like I said, just seems like another pointless move. It's just too slow. He needs to be, I guess, moving his pieces towards, this area of the board right here. But I guess he can't, really. He really has no good moves. So I'm trying to rook lift. Bring the rook up, trying to move it over to one of these squares right here. So that's the whole point. And then maybe thoughts of doubling up. Now he brings the king back, realizing that there is imminent danger here. So here comes Harry. The knight is repinned here. So he tries another counter sacrifice. I like it because obviously, I mean, he can take the pawn, because if I take, the rook's then on pre from the queen. So I just ignore what's going on over here and take the pawn with check. He takes with the pawn, which I think is maybe slightly inaccurate. I don't know. It may have, not been accurate, but it's just, if he would have taken with the queen, the king, if he would have taken with the king, then I don't know. I feel like I would have had to then move my bishop, and I don't know. But he took with the pawn. So I got one of the defenders away. And now I make this move since the knight is pinned, forcing his bishop to come back, which is really the only move here. And that's exactly what he did. He moved the bishop back. And now here I'm thinking, my attack is kind of going dry, I feel. Because because this square right here, the g5 square, is where I want my rook to be originally. And I can't put it there now. So what I do is I move the bishop. I move the bishop back to h6. Not knowing, I was assuming that he would come with the rook and challenge it, and indeed he did. He came rook over. Now what I played here was, now I see how my attack is imminent here. Rook f4, a real subtle move. It kind of looks like I'm moving. He challenged my bishop, so it looks like I'm moving my queen up to protect the bishop, right? Well, yeah, that is one of the reasons. But another reason is I now have this deadly attack here, I feel. And he has to be very, very accurate here. But he plays this move. b6, just a so slow move. And as you can see by the engine, the best move is another sacrifice. on g6. Look how weak this pawn right here, this square, has become. So I sacrifice with a check. And I guess the best move that the engine is describing is for the king to drop back to g8. But I still have a huge advantage. Unfortunately, after the check, he didn't do that. He took, which leads to mate in a couple of moves. With check on g5 with the queen, forcing him back. Another check on g7, and on g7, forcing him further into no man's land. Take the rook on h8 with another check, only move. Well, he could move his king right here. It would just lead to the same thing, though. He blocks with the bishop, and I deliver a final blow with the queen. Checkmate on f8. So, it was a fairly interesting game. It involved 2 sacrifices, so it was, this was actually a rematch. I had actually lost the game before to this guy, and we played 4 games, and I'm going to post the other 2, because the other 2 were even more interesting than this one alone. So, thank y'all for watching, and let's get to the other videos.